You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Hello there. Welcome to the new weekly edition of Skills World Live. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. And doesn't it feel like only yesterday that we completed our daily broadcasts that resulted in over 150 guests joining us in informed chat and topical debate over the 6-week period of intense lockdown? Have no fear though, folks. All the things that made the show a great success so far will continue. This new weekly format has been designed by the editor, Gavin O'Mara, to bring you the very best of all the news, views and interviews from around the education sector. Whether that's here in the UK or you're listening from abroad, and we know there's quite a number of you, the whole point of what we are doing here, first launching and then continuing with this programme and its new weekly guise, is to connect the world of FE. And note to self as well, try and make sure you press the right jingle button when you're introducing the opening season of the show. However, what an eventful week it's been. Thankfully, in terms of tackling the pandemic, both the death and infection rates have continued to fall across most countries. Here in the UK, we're expecting to see more commercial shops and businesses starting to open from next week. In education, things look a bit more tentative, as the government drops its demand that all primary and secondary school pupils must go back in this academic year. Meanwhile, FE providers are making their own judgments and putting in place measures that keep both staff and students safe. The more phased return to learning has sparked concerns about the prospect of an epidemic of educational poverty if some proper teaching does not resume soon. Internationally, the OECD has warned this week that world economic output has already plummeted by 7.6% this year, before climbing back to 2.8% next year. They estimate Britain to be one of the worst countries affected, with unemployment across the richer nations hitting perhaps 10% this year. Be rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be following all the twists and turns of the post-COVID-19 recovery story every single step of the way. We'll be examining its implications on the skills systems of this country, the United Kingdom, and the countries of our many friends from overseas. So make sure you hit subscribe on the FE News website or go to one of your favourite podcasting platforms like Spotify, Spreaker or iTunes and subscribe there. Above all, tell your colleagues about the show and ask them to take a listen into the only radio station dedicated to the world of skills, apprenticeships, and of course, FE. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. On tonight's programme, we're drilling down into one of the big ideas to emerge as a result of COVID-19. Ever since it became apparent that with up to 230,000 graduates joining the labour market this summer, experts say that unemployment could triple from 5 to 15% for 18 to 24-year-olds by next winter. That's potentially 1.2 million young people joining the ranks of the dole queues in England, unless, in the words of one of our guests this evening, we are prepared to throw the kitchen sink at it. The chair of the Education Select Committee, Robert Halfon MP, thinks he has the answer, telling me in a pre-recorded interview we'll play shortly that government must guarantee every young person an apprenticeship to everyone that wants one. Joining us in the phone chat sections of this slightly extended show this evening are some pretty high-profile guests. The leaders of 2 award-winning apprenticeship providers, Angela Middleton MBE, founder of the Limitless Group, and Richard Marsh of Kaplan, will be poring over with me the Halfon Plan. In the middle segment of the show, we'll be catching up with the social commentator and iconoclast David Goodart, as well as the well-known skills sector expert Susan Pember of Holex. I'll be debating with them what else needs to happen to support the coronavirus generation, many of whom are facing the worst job prospects since the Great Depression. Don't go away though, folks. What would Thursday evenings be without our regular instalment of hashtag Stand Up for Skills? Yep, that warrior-like Boudica of City and Guilds fame, Kirsty Donnelly MBE, will be back on her campaign soapbox, interviewing two wonderful guests. But first, let's find out what's been making the news headlines in your skills world this week. Secretary of State for Education in England, Gavin Williamson, has announced a further 88 FE providers, bringing the total to 180 across England that will deliver the government's new T-level programme from September 2022. Equivalent to A-levels, the new T-levels are a full-time technical study programme designed to progress young people into the skilled jobs that the economy needs. The first three T-levels are due to commence this September with a small number of learners. The Department for Education's announcement comes at a time when further doubt has been cast on the viability of launching the T-level programme amidst the coronavirus crisis. This week, 4 T-level providers announced they were dropping out of the programme in September, citing concerns about delivering in the current climate. In other news, the Education Skills Funding Agency in England has said it is considering extending its COVID-19 supply relief scheme, where funding is given to FE providers ahead of delivery. The announcement follows the decision by the Cabinet Office to extend its scheme until October the 31st. The results of a separate scheme to support European Social Fund providers is yet to be announced. And finally, Leeds City College has attained a 100% pass rate after a month of successful NEBOSH courses were completed in March. The National General Certificate is the most widely held health and safety qualification in the UK, with over 175,000 people having gained the award since it was launched in 1989. With the current coronavirus pandemic, Leeds City College has developed virtual courses to bridge the gap between face-to-face training and e-learning as part of its digital strategy. That's all your Skills World news from fenews.co.uk. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Buick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111. That tech house tune is called Reckless Love by On Di Norte. Like all the tracks on this show, it was taken from our independent music site of choice, epidemicsound.com. Now, tonight's big debating topic is, do we need an apprentice guarantee? Usually, when we hear that word guarantee, it conjures up the idea of something that will definitely happen. Irreversible, irrevocable even. Applied to the world of apprenticeships, it suggests that come what may, employers will create the apprentice slots for young people to fill. That was certainly the conclusion drawn when the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, recently, who said at a Downing Street press conference that he would introduce an apprentice guarantee. As you can imagine, that prospect has got a lot of people in the skills sector very excited, but some are concerned. The Shadow Minister for Apprenticeships, Toby Perkins, has branded the pledge a deception, while some labour market economists warn of the dangers of apprenticeships being turned into make-work schemes and employers feeling compelled to take part. Yesterday, I caught up with the person most associated with the idea of the apprentice guarantee. I'm referring, of course, to the campaigning MP for Harlow, former Skills Minister and Chair of the House of Commons Education Select Committee, Robert Halfon. After this short break, you can listen to what he told me. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Robert Halfon, you've been spearheading this whole campaign to secure an apprenticeship guarantee from government, first raising it with the Prime Minister when he came to the House of Commons Liaison Committee recently. I mean, for the avoidance of doubt, can you tell our listeners what exactly you mean by a guarantee of an apprenticeship for young people?
I've been campaigning on this for some time, and the reason is I think it would be an incredible offer to young people, not just because of the coronavirus, but a serious offering that young people could get on that ladder of opportunity to get the skills, the training they need to get job security and prosperity at the very top of that ladder. I'll come to the how in a bit, but I just wanted to give the setting. And I always felt that everyone is focused on graduates. And of course, going to university is a wonderful thing, but you have to take out a whacking loan. Not every graduate gets a good graduate job now, and that sadly is an increasing proportion who don't. So I wanted to make sure that apprentices have the same prestige as going to university. And I thought an apprentice guarantee offered by the Prime Minister is a start. Now, in terms of the how, which is very important, is first of all, you'd have to be clear that every youngster would have to have the required qualification. Secondly, I would massively increase the public sector targets for hiring apprentices. I would use the £3 billion fund that the government have announced. So this isn't new money, because it's always very easy to ask the government for more money. But there is a £3 billion skills fund that they've announced to fund all the training costs of non-levy payers, and if it's stretched, some of the wage costs at least in the first year. And whilst you couldn't necessarily say to every single apprentice 100% they will get that apprenticeship, if you create the right climate and conditions, you could make it become a de facto offering, if not de jure, because at the end of the day, you can't force an organisation. Now, in terms of the levy payers, I would say to the levy players that if you hire a younger person from 16 to 19, you will use much more of your levy. If you don't, if you're gaming the system or if you're just retraining existing staff, you will use a much lower proportion of your levy. And finally, in terms of the money that goes to universities and the loans and so on, I would make money to universities conditional on that at least 50% of every single course offered by each university around the country was a degree level apprenticeship. At the moment, there's an 800 million access fund, which is to promote rightly diversity and more people from disadvantaged groups. I would use the bulk of that to promote degree apprenticeships, because I think that is the best way to get people from disadvantaged backgrounds to climb up that higher education ladder. And I think those are a number of measures, a lot more flesh on the bones that needs to be teased out in all this. But I think that would really dramatically transform the landscape. And around all that, there would be evangelization by the Prime Minister, of the Education Secretary, people in communities, people like you, training providers and FE, about how the goal of the government is to get to try and offer every single young person with the right qualification an apprenticeship.
Okay. I knew, Robert, if I asked you the question, how do you define guarantee, you would have done a huge amount of thought, and you've just hit probably several of the other points and questions I wanted to raise with you about, who is it for, how is it paid for? But just to unpack some of what you said there, I mean, you'll be well aware, not least as a former skills minister, that one of the features of the apprenticeship brand, particularly the reformed apprenticeships, has always been that first and foremost, it is a job, whether it's a new hire or an existing employee. It is about upskilling or reskilling those employees, whether they're young or whether they're older, in the workforce. Do you envisage any issues or challenges around the notion of guaranteeing an apprenticeship that, as we saw in the 1980s, with the brand of youth training schemes, the moment the government starts saying this is what young people must do, employers then start complaining that this is something that they're being made to do as opposed to something they want to do. Is that something that worries you at all?
No, it's quite the opposite. I think that why is it that, in Germany and Switzerland, you have something like 50 to 70% of students doing vocational education.
Yeah.
They even start training people from the age of 14. And when I went there to see all this, I asked them, why are they doing it? I said, what do you mean why? They said, we just believe in this. And I think the only way to change these things is to change the culture of our nation. The only way we can build an apprenticeship and skills nation is change the way. And sometimes you do have to have government acting. I'm not a kind of libertarian conservative. I don't believe in big government. I believe in good government.
Yeah.
And I do think government sometimes needs to use its levers in order to promote things that are for the good of society and for to help meet our skills needs.
Yeah. And as you said,
I mean, just one other thing. If you take the levy payers, for example, so if I went to see last year, I think it's massive pet store in my constituency,
right.
And they have apprentices all the way through their business now. They're levy payers, but in every part. So it isn't just retraining existing people on management degrees or whatever. And they have someone on their board as a apprentice director. Now, that didn't happen 5 years ago in a million years. That behaviour has changed because the levy has made companies change their behaviour. Of course, the levy needs to be improved, and I get all that. But nevertheless, the principle of it is the right one, that companies should invest in skills and apprenticeships. Yeah. And many companies, in the terms of have behaved well and actually are using their levy for a very good purpose and offering young people this chance to climb that ladder of opportunity.
As you say, ultimately, this is about culture change. You gave the Swiss example there. Actually, it's 2/3 of young people go on to an apprenticeship up to the age of 19, and many of them obviously go on to do degree-level apprenticeships as well. So that challenge in England of changing the culture of investment in young people will obviously continue, not least with up to 700,000 of them coming onto the labour market, potentially needing to progress into further and higher education this year. But on the point, though, about how we, in a sense, bring about that culture change and we incentivise the behaviour. I mean, you mentioned, for example, redirecting what was called, I think, the National Retraining Fund. This was a manifesto commitment back in December's general election. It's about £3 billion.
Actually, sorry, there are two different funds here. There is the retraining fund that was announced by Philip Hammond that the governments are continuing. I'm not 100% sure of how much that is going to be. Right. But then there was a separate £3 billion skills fund announced in the... And I was talking about the skills fund. I think the training fund should be used for skills. And depending on how much that is, I think it should be used as a skills credit for all businesses, but predominantly SMEs, where just as you have R&D for research and development tax credits, you should have skills tax credits for businesses to train their workers. So in lifelong learning.
I get you. So in terms of the use of that fund, I mean, again, you'll know this, that at the moment, in effect, the levy, the £2.4 billion in England, supports the off-the-job training element, and with that comes obviously the 20% off-the-job requirement as well. Are you saying that as part of affecting this guarantee for young people that some wage subsidy element would have to be introduced as well?
So the levy payers, I would have it as it is, because I think big companies should pay the wages predominantly of their...
of firms, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And people forget that actually it is just 2% of companies.
Yeah.
in terms of the making an apprentice guarantee a reality, depending on how far the money's stretched, I'd definitely pay for the training. And if there was available money, I would possibly look at paying some of the first year, if not all of the first year of SME wages, but just the first year of that apprenticeship.
Yeah.
I'd also look at ideas that are coming out from some in the FE sector where I'd possibly changing the 20% requirements. And if companies, because of the coming out of the coronavirus, want their workers, they might be more likely to hire an apprentice if the first year of that apprenticeship is spent predominantly with the training provider, with the college, the college.
Yeah.
At the first year, and then the second year is in the firm.
Yeah, I just wanted to check with you that you're not against the concept of wage subsidy. I think, as you say, that has to be worked out both within.
I used to be very much against it, but I think the situation is so different now that we're going to need to incentivise business in every possible way.
Again, I mean, it's interesting from the recent Australian example where they have introduced wage subsidy. I mean, it still only amounts to a very tiny percentage of the overall package or cost that employers have to incur to take on apprentices, and it hasn't been that successful. But I think commentators looking at that have said, well, maybe it's to do with the fact that the levy has not been that generous. On the issue of it being an all-age, all-levels programme, sorry to use that jargon in terms of qualifications, but I think you know what I mean. It's from level 2 right up to degree level now. Are you saying potentially with the guarantee, because you've obviously deliberately looked at young people, that you think that the whole programme now should be recalibrated towards young people? So it is about more of, quoting those Germanic models, it's more about young people, it's more about the levels 2 to sort of 5, which is sub-degree level, than it has been around management degrees and people who are
So I think the programme needs to have, the whole apprentice programme, the skills programme of the company needs to have 3 aims. One is, does it help people from disadvantaged backgrounds climb up that ladder?
Right, okay. So social mobility, number 1 for you, or social justice?
No, I never use that word because social mobility sounds like a Vodafone advert. So does it help young people climb up that ladder?
Yeah.
Second thing is, does it meet our skills needs? The third thing is, does it mean that this person who has got this, he or she who has got this apprenticeship or skills training is getting good outcomes?
Okay.
Job security and prosperity, whatever background they come from. So those are the 3 aims of a skills system. There have to be, especially with the 4th Industrial Revolution coming up. And I think that should apply both for lifelong learning for apprenticeships, for any kind of skills training.
Okay. Just briefly on the levy then, we mentioned the 2% of firms that it applies to that have payrolls of over £3 million a year. Would you extend the scope of the levy to help obviously pay for the guarantee, or are you broadly content with the level it's at now?
Before the coronavirus, I was thinking maybe you should extend it. But I think at the moment, businesses are going to be struggling so much that we shouldn't hit them with any more levies, and we should actually be doing the opposite and giving them financial incentives to employ people.
Okay.
So I wouldn't at this point in time extend any levy, or I wouldn't impose extra business taxes on business in any other way either.
Yeah.
I do think there is a difference between a levy and a tax. In a few years down the line, that's a different story, but I think certainly not at the moment. We need to make the climate as business friendly as possible.
Indeed, and the CBI will always be looking carefully at anything that they perceive, certainly as a payroll tax or an increase in taxes on business. Now, just finally, Robert, you were very vocal last year about the complexity of quality assurance. I mean, you liken the system of having 21 different external quality assurance bodies in apprenticeship as watching a Ben-Hur movie with casts of thousands, I think you said. I mean, a consultation giving this role to Ofqual and the Office for Students in Future has just closed, and Gillian Keegan, the new skills minister, told me recently that she's reviewing her options. From a quality assurance point of view, are you still of the view that the whole piece needs to be streamlined only with only statutory bodies like Ofqual involved in the role of quality assurance in future? Have you changed your mind on that?
So this is an argument I lost when I was skills minister. I was overruled.
Right.
I think it's
back on. I mean, they've just consulted on the idea of giving it to.
So I wanted it to be to maximum. It's a spaghetti western at the moment. I'm a smallest beautiful person.
Indeed.
I'd be very happy if Ofqual and maybe iFate or whoever it may be, but just 1 or 2 organisations. Keep it simple. And I won't use the last word, but keep it simple. Yeah.
Okay. Certainly not the 21 different EQAs we have at the moment.
It's a spaghetti western.
Indeed. Robert Halfon, MP, Chair of the House of Commons Education Select Committee. Thanks so much for joining us on Skills World Live this evening.
Thanks, Tom.
Subscribe to Skills World Live
at fenews.co.uk/skillsworld. Welcome back live. To continue tonight's big debate, we're going to explore the whole idea of an apprentice guarantee with two sector leaders. Joining me on the line is Angela Middleton, MBE, Chairman and CEO of the Limitless Group, host of the I Want to Be a podcast and author of the First Job book series. Good evening, Angela.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Well, thanks. Thanks for coming back on the show too. And in this three-way conversation this evening, we are joined by Richard Marsh, Apprenticeship Partnerships Director at Kaplan. Good evening to you, Richard.
Hey, good evening, Tom. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, great. Thanks to you both for coming on this first of our weekly live shows. Now, Angela, let's come to you first as someone that knows all about working with employers and delivering apprenticeships at scale. What do you think to the feasibility of guaranteeing potentially up to 1 million apprenticeship places for young people in the next year?
Well, I think the first thing you need is the desire of everybody involved to for it to work, and that's I think that is definitely in place. Obviously, it's in place as far as Boris is concerned, and also Rob. And it was Boris who sort of first introduced me to the idea of apprenticeships in February 11. So he's obviously been a long-term supporter. But also, I mean, it does remind me of the situation 2009, post the previous recession, when employers were super keen to start growing and recovering. But one of the issues was that they couldn't either afford the talent that they needed, or alternatively, they couldn't attract it for whatever reason. And so the answer for them, even then, when we got involved around about sort of 10, 11, was apprenticeships. And I think so all parties will be keen on it. And I think in terms of feasibility, there's many ways that it could work, ranging from redirecting the use of the levy so that, we have to use a proportion of it for younger people. There's many ways it can work. So I think the desire is there. Yeah. Feasibly, it can work, yeah.
And indeed, that interview there that I just conducted with Robert Helfand, I think he was full of all sorts of ideas actually about how you could deliver it, including, as you mentioned there, redirecting some of the levy resource. Now, Richard, you also lead a chunky apprenticeship delivery operation at Kaplan, and you've written about how employers have to create a proper job role for a formal apprenticeship to be valid. I mean, in that context, do you think legally the government can actually guarantee an apprenticeship to any young person that wants one?
Well, yeah, absolutely not, of course. And it's although, I'm broadly in favour of this, it's a really exciting idea. I've listened to Mr. Halfan talk it through, and he's very caveated. He's saying for people who are 16, 17 or 18, who've got the requisite school qualifications, then there'll be an incentive for employers. And I think that's absolutely right. So I think we have to be a little bit careful on the guarantee.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, wasn't it? Because he wasn't really saying now that there should be 100% guarantee. He's sort of saying, look, if you get all of these preconditions in place, there's no reason why the culture of employers taking on young people in particular and investing in them, there's no reason why that shouldn't happen, really, was what he was saying.
And one of the things that, I've found in my own experience with young people is that they've come in to us, and they're not really hitting the ground running because they've not had a particularly great experience from wherever they've been at school or whatever. And, they come in really disbelieving that they're going to have the opportunity to even get a job, let alone an apprenticeship. And we say to them, look, we will be able to definitely get you that and we give them a few ifs, conditions that they've, got to achieve certain levels of things like attendance and, math and English and things like that. But also we say to them, we can't guarantee that it is going to be, on a specific day. But what we can guarantee is if we do this, this, this and this, it is going to happen. And if you start to look at the numbers, I mean, if we only even take SMEs, there's 5.6 million SMEs, you're only talking there of 20% of those. Yeah. And with my experience in the last 10 years of working with apprentices in both boom and, the bust years post the financial recession, it is 100% possible. It might not be tomorrow, but if you have concerted effort and you put all the right things in place, you will find that position for a young person. And particularly if we start to up the incentives for small businesses and we start to redirect the levy, I see no reason why it's not an amazing target to go for and that we ought to really be able to do it.
Okay, well, let's just talk about those incentives in a bit more detail then, because again, I thought Robert Halfon's interview was quite indicative in that he was saying, look, you keep the levy broadly as it is in terms of how much it collects from 2% of firms, which is in England £2.4 billion. He said he would take about £800 million from the current sort of Office of Fair Access fund, which is about getting those from disadvantaged backgrounds into university, and he would kind of redirect that towards more high level or degree apprenticeships. And then obviously there's the £3 billion National Skills Fund, which of course was announced in the Conservative manifesto at the last general election. So you can see you're not far off, six and a bit billion pounds there. I mean, that is a very, very chunky fund that you can use, can't you, for those 20% of employers?
That's right.
Angela, you're talking about. So what would you do with it, Richard?
Well, I think you have to be really careful as well that you're not substituting one thing for another.
Sure.
So if you put all of that money into that and then there's no new money, I think it would be difficult. If you look what happened in France last week, Macron's put £1 billion into apprenticeships by offering employers between €5,000 and €8,000 for every young apprentice they take on.
Really? Right.
And that's caused huge excitement all across the French economy. So that kind of clear, simple, early boost of additional money, as they did with the furlough scheme for people, can make a real difference. Well, the difficulty is then making that a long-term thing.
Angela, I mean, the furlough scheme, as you well know, is underwriting 80% of wages. I mean, what level or percentage would you put at any future wage subsidy scheme then around the apprentice guarantee?
Well, I think that there's a number of ways that you could utilise that existing money, and I very much agree with you that we don't want to substitute one thing for another. But I don't think if we're talking of an incentive of that magnitude, I don't think that we should be directing all of that to the delivery of the training. I think that's where we've gone wrong before. The delivery of the training, especially with EPA, etc., it just prices itself out in many cases. I think we should be rationalising the types of apprenticeships, reducing the number of providers, making sure that the apprenticeships that are on offer are related to careers of the future. So definitely rationalising. And then what we ought to be doing is saying, right, of that incentive, X amount can go towards the delivery of the training, and then some of it can be utilised by the employer either to help subsidise the wages and or to help them to recruit people that can manage young people going into their business. Because one of the big objections for businesses is, look, I just don't have the capability, the time, much as I would love to, or the appetite for risk of taking on somebody that is, straight out of school with very little experience. I'm talking, they would very often be concerned about the safeguarding and things of that nature. So I think if we were to relax the ability of the employer to use some of this incentive, and we also cap the cost of delivering an apprenticeship so that some of that money is available, that the employer ought to be able to use it in different ways to be able to make it an effective solution for them, because otherwise companies will want to do it, but they won't do it for some of those reasons. So I think, and also with regard to the furlough scheme, I mean, I think that is definitely another mechanism that could be used to sort of try to use some of that and filter it through via an HMRC furlough type system.
Well, absolutely, because the levy, as you know, is collected via the HMRC portal, and it's put back into digital accounts, obviously, for those levy-paying employers. I mean, one of the things I just find absolutely remarkable, I think it's a great credit, actually, to the so-called taxman or taxwoman, that the whole furlough scheme seems to have been delivered to millions of businesses without, I haven't seen very many complaints about people not being paid, for example. Absolutely. So it's turned out to be an incredibly efficient way, not only of us handing money over to the government, but actually in reverse. It's turned out to work quite well coming back. So how could that, Richard, actually help sort of oil the palms of those employers that aren't currently involved in apprenticeships, but would get us up to that magic figure where actually we can at least create a place for every young person that wants one or needs one?
Yeah, I think the principles of the furlough, in that it was quick and it was simple, are the key things for an incentive scheme. If we say to employers there's an incentive scheme coming in 6-9 months, they won't recruit for 6 to 9 months. So we've got to incentivize employers quickly and early and simply in the way that the furlough did. Something like the national insurance rebate that we currently give for apprentices is another good existing route that we could deploy. So using an existing channel with quick, with quick and simple processes would make all the difference for employers. So that's the kind of design principles. And for individuals, as Angela said and Robert said, there needs to be an incentive, not to say it doesn't matter what you do at school, fail all your GCSEs as an apprenticeship guaranteed. It needs to be do your best, and you still might have to do some further training. And we've got colleges and everybody can help you with that. But if you work hard and try your best, we will do our best to find you an apprenticeship. And that's really, really exciting, I think.
Okay.
And I think as well, people are used to the idea of an apprenticeship now, but I think it's sort of lost its way, and it started to indeed become a substitute for one thing for another, with large companies wanting to use the levy and using it to upskill existing workforce. And, that wasn't where it was intended to go. And I think it's brilliant, really, that we're now talking about adjusting that back to what the intention was with apprenticeships in the very first instance, which was to provide entry to industry, so every individual, regardless of what their educational background had been. And I think that we've got the mechanisms there, like you said, the furlough mechanism, but we must allow employers to utilise that money in a way that they need to make the apprenticeship work for them. It can't be all having to go to the providers. And then, I think then we will see a very different scenario to the one we saw before. Yeah.
Angela, we're losing your signals slightly there, so do remember what the best spot in the house is for the 4G connection.
Sorry.
Try and make your way there. But Richard, on the broader issue then of young people, because obviously we're talking about a programme, albeit streamlined, albeit rationalised, albeit potentially have a different set of incentives attached to it. But it's not necessarily, for example, going to be right for the 260,000 HE graduates that are going to come onto the labour market this summer. So what do we do about that group of people who, as we know, in recent years anyway, have found themselves more often than not, certainly for their first jobs, have found themselves in what you might call non-graduate jobs? So what do we do to try and ensure that those 260,000 or so HE graduates don't just end up displacing the young people who don't have a degree, who equally could do those non-graduate jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an obvious and clear sort of danger with any big scheme. I do think, though, we can't restrict this to 16, 17 and 18-year-olds, because 16-year-olds are generally still in school. 17 and 18-year-olds, we haven't had a huge NEET problem with. It's 19, 20, 21. So I think one is doing all we can to get 19, 20, 21-year-olds into employers so that they're in there and competing before the graduates enter the market. And then perhaps, realising that graduates are perhaps better equipped to get jobs in some areas. And I think, allowing them to access apprenticeships for retraining or further training is right. But I don't think it would be right to extend a wage subsidy, for example, to apprentices.
Okay. Final thoughts from both here. Sorry, Angela.
One of the things I was going to say in regard to that as well with this older age, I think we should have another look at the traineeship program, because, that again could lend itself very well. There's two things on that. Firstly, one is that, you've got a lot of 16, 17-year-olds who would really love to go on that now, would really benefit from it. And then, be able to access an apprenticeship because of what they would have learned on it, but they're not being released from the school books until the end of the academic year, which means they can't do anything for the next 2 months. So, we've got many applicants who can't come on because of that reason. But the second thing is that I think the actual concept of a traineeship lends itself really well to the ones you're talking about, 19, 20, 21, and even, those who've done a degree, because they still have in common that lack of ability very often to either identify what career they want, and secondly, to be able to package themselves up so they can get it. And so I really think that we ought to have a look at that readiness scheme and, a cut down version of a traineeship, something that, we've been doing a ton of them online at the moment. And, we've done a proven end to end. You can have somebody go through all the programs, you find them a job, they're doing this job and they're doing it from home. I mean, we've got some amazing case studies. So I think having a look at that would be a good idea. Yeah, it would. Now, final thoughts. We've only got about 60 seconds left in this segment. Coming to you first, Richard, and last word to you, Angela. I mean, I did ask Robert Halfon there about the whole quality agenda and the fact that we've got multiple bodies. I mean, just quick thoughts on where that whole quality agenda needs to go with the Institute for Apprenticeships, obviously in the lead. Sure. I think what's been neglected is some of the original design points of letting employers be the arbiters of quality.
and we've got to keep the market element and give employers a choice. They won't stay with poor providers. And everything else is helpful and useful, but the government doesn't have to do everything. Let's give employers a really active role in deciding who the best providers are.
Sure. Well, that happens obviously with the 290-odd endpoint assessment organisations, but I was talking more about the 21 external quality assurance bodies, which are also, some of them would say they're employer-led, but it just leads to a very inconsistent, confusing lack of standardisation, doesn't it, Angela?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would rationalise. I think that's one of the places we've gone wrong in trying to sort of incorporate every single employer's desire. We ended up with so many different standards being submitted and passed in the early days. And we ought to now be looking, like I said, at careers of the future. It's 5 or 6 broad categories. And we ought to, I think, then be rationalising the standards in those and show some clear career paths. So, for example, if it's in tech, we ought to show some clear career paths there. Apprenticeships, 0 to degree, which is what we talked about, before, that brand of starting at the beginning and, 4 or 5 years worth of apprenticeships, going through the different levels with a very clear career path. And I think that would really help with the quality agenda. And then employers would understand more what the apprenticeship contains and what it leads to.
Okay, well, as ever with you two, fascinating thoughts, views and insights. Angela Middleton and Richard Marsh, thanks so much for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you ever so much. Bye-bye all.
Bye now.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick.
Just call you when the moon is rising. I'm craving every moment with you. I can't just need you when the tides are turning. I cherish every second with you. I've got to hold on to your heart every day of the week, every week of the year. I've got to rewind and restart so you get what you need, so you get all of me. Yeah, you get all of me, baby, I give you all of me. Please take what you want from me. Ooh, ooh, yeah, you get all of me, baby, I give you all of me. Please take what you want from me. Ooh, ooh,
That was You Get All of Me by Catnip. And if that didn't get your O'Mara-inspired #FE workout off to a banging start, then frankly, nothing will. Now, to continue this debate tonight about the Apprentice Guarantee, I'm delighted to be joined on the line by David Goodart, who's the Head of Demography, Immigration and Integration, and is the Director of the Integration Hub at the Policy Exchange. Good evening, David.
Hello, Tom. Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining us. And also in this three-way segment, we're joined by Dr. Sue Pember, who's Director of Policy and External Relations at Holex, and is back on the show by popular demand. Hello, Sue.
Hi, great to be with you.
Thanks. And let's start with you, Sue. In a recent piece for TES, the headline read, "We must throw the kitchen sink at youth unemployment." Tell us in policy terms what would be in that sink and how much is it going to cost?
Well, as you know, every young person already has, the sort of entitlement, if you want to call it that, to be in education, training, or a job with training, whether it be a college and a school. And that's we raised the participation rate, good 6 or 7 years ago. So when we say, how much is it going to cost? First of all, I just think we should release the money we've got. Because if even before COVID-19, if every youngster had decided to take up that legal right, I think it is a legal right, if every youngster wanted to take up that legal right last September, then government would have had to find the money. So when I say throw the kitchen sink at it, I really mean, we tell them that they've got that right. So from September, they know now, somebody needs to tell them now, and I think that's all of us, right? They have got a right to stay at school, to go to a college, to go to an independent provider, to go to a job with training, and that's their right. So we have already got a guarantee in place. We just need to make sure that they take that offer, and we have no needs. So where the energy has to be put is that the youngsters who just drop out of the system and become the needs, we find them now, we don't let them to drop out, and we ensure that they're supported all through their learning over the next couple of years.
Now, look, as you say, that guarantee would work clearly for the 16 to 18-year-olds, but what would we do about the 260,000 HE graduates coming onto the labour market who potentially might be unemployed this summer? What do we guarantee, if anything, for them?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and in a way, we need to think of a sort of similar package. They're coming onto the labour market, or they've got an alternative as well. They could stay on and do a master's degree. They could go on to, a higher level on a form of apprenticeship, which the minister or the chair of the select committee was talking about earlier on in your programme. But we have to support both them and employers. The last thing that we can do is actually forget about this group and say to them, right, well, you've got your degree now, you make your own way. That won't work. No. We do need to have programmes for them.
Okay. David, you've just edited a volume of essays published by Policy Exchange that outlines the training we need now. In it, you reference your concern that we're spending too much time and money as a nation on full-time 3- and 4-year HE courses for young people while neglecting those in apprenticeships and those not, of course, at university. Presumably then you'd be a supporter of a massive redistribution of resources away from universities and the resources instead put in the hands of those pursuing technical education and lifelong learning.
I certainly would, yeah. I mean, particularly given the fact that, about a third of graduates are still not in graduate employment even 5 years after graduating, and we have these huge skill shortage. I mean, this is even pre-COVID-19. We had huge skill shortages in areas like construction, electricians, coders, all sorts of things. They're often highly paid jobs, but skilled trades and other areas like that. We've just got this kind of misalignment. We've been directing everybody to university, and we have particularly often well-paid, sort of higher manual technical jobs have been going begging, and lots of employers. We had a piece in our collection from Paul Lewis of King's College. Lots of employers have ended up hiring graduates to do these kind of technician style jobs, which they're not suited to doing, and they often move on after a year or two. So yes, I mean, I think, and the other thing, the apprenticeship, the it's been a sort of bit of a mixed bag. I think it should be. You either increase the levy. It's 0.5% of the wage bill at the moment, but that does not cover the full cost of an apprentice. So people have been using it for these rather discretionary things, MBAs for managers, and they have been doing. It's true, they've been doing some higher level apprenticeships, level 4 and 5. That's not a bad thing. Yeah, but we got only 9% of school leavers go into apprenticeships.
Yeah,
in this
and
country.
that's been in decline for several years, actually, well before COVID, and of course Susan will know that very well indeed. I just want to cover this point though about, in the sense, how do we then empower young people, and by this I mean really kind of 16 to 24-year-olds, because what I thought was interesting when I looked at sort of both sets of proposals that you have written about in various places. David, you talked about giving every young person, or probably actually every adult, £3,000 to spend on training, on education and lifelong learning. I think, Sue, in your paper with Mark Corney, you did a little bit of totting up of, for example, how much the state anyway would have to pay legally on job seekers allowance for an 18-year-old, and that comes to about sort of $3,000 a year. And I think in your paper what you said was far better to use that money as a maintenance grant, for example, to allow someone to go back into full-time education. I just thought it was interesting that, between the two of you, you've kind of arrived at a central point, which is, should we put the purchasing power of state resource, taxpayer backed, into the hands of individuals, and perhaps it's about them finding their own way through a number of different sources or courses, which could be full-time higher education, it could be apprenticeship, it could be entrepreneurship, it could be, frankly, using the money to go off kayaking if it's allowed down the Amazon for a year, or some kind of citizen service or overseas voluntary work. Would you, Sue, favour that more expansive, flexible approach? But nevertheless, it still hits your central point, which is we don't want a generation of young people on the dole doing nothing.
I'm not a great believer of setting up another system. So I'm not a great believer of giving somebody an account.
Right.
And passing
the money
through
well, you probably
way.
had a bad experience from that. Your time in the
Well,
department.
But mainly because it just adds another layer of bureaucracy into the situation.
Right.
Where I really think that if you tell somebody something enough times, they believe it, and then they'll go to their local college and they will actually then pick up that entitlement that way without having a third party managing the money and a lot of admin going into the account itself. However, but I do believe in that approach. I don't believe we spend enough time saying to prospective students, why should you do this course? What financial benefit you're going to get from this course? Don't you think you should be doing this for your GCSEs, this for your A-levels? I don't think we map out the right progression routes. And therefore, I can understand when people say, we got people on the wrong degrees. I'm never quite sure of that expression, and you might not have quite said it in that way, because in this country, we've never been that good at skills matching.
Right,
but what I do know
central
is
planning,
Yes, but I do know when you trust the young person, they do suddenly manage to find the right sort of path. Yeah. And I appreciate that there's some of the older industries are short of staff, or even the high-tech ones. But if we'd listened to ministers back in the late 90s who said we shouldn't be offering media, and then we shouldn't be offering gaming, they are like, if you think of the East End of London, they are the two big growth industries there. But if we'd listened to central planners and politicians, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So you have to get this balance right. But working with the individual and sounding them out about what they want is something that I'm really keen about for the future.
Yeah.
And we used to talk about the learner voice, but we don't give it that sort of airtime now.
Sure. Well, there's the learner voice sort of sitting on a panel at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education giving their advice, and there's the kind of learner voice which is through the pocket, essentially, as you say, giving them that purchasing power. I appreciate you're not a fan of the idea of skills accounts, but David, you seem to be hinting at that in your paper, in the sense that can you trust completely, top-down state organs, however sort of well-meaning, to actually try and tackle this whole crisis in as agile and responsive a way as possible? Surely this is the era, isn't it, of take back control to some extent. So what do you give to individuals in that context?
Well, exactly, and therefore I don't see what the objection is to the, some new version of the individual learning account, learning the lessons of the debacle of 2000, but much more ambitious. I mean, this is giving, this is empowering individuals. It's saying, you have, X amount of money to spend on a training or retraining course. You draw. I mean, it can't be beyond the wit of some civil servants to design that. Learning the lessons of what went wrong, extraordinarily went wrong in 2000. I mean, all those sort of fraudulent training companies that emerged. I mean, they must be able to learn those lessons. And this is precisely about giving. The money follows the individual. But the other thing that I'm not. I'm not really a sort of training buff in the way that you two guys are. But it's always surprised me that we don't have anything in this. We don't have a kind of single source, a kind of book, a website that tells people these are the different sort of jobs you can do. This is how much a coding course will cost. If you're doing training, and these are the occupations that you can. That you can go into, so it would be a book that would gather together, and it would have to be constantly updated, obviously.
Sure.
But it would guide people through this maze. Sort of say, someone thinks they have an aptitude for something, they can go to the book and look up and find out. These are if I do this course, I'll be qualified to do that job. This is what it's likely to pay after 3 years. That's what it'll pay after 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And if I stick at it.
Yeah. And David, that's a very live debate. Cool.
Yeah.
20 seconds. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But look, the whole challenge of information, advice, and guidance. Actually, we could have a whole other program. We've had one on that already, and I know Sue would be a great contributor to that. But David Goodhart, Policy Exchange, and Dr. Sue Pember at Holex. Thanks for coming on the show this evening. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. Cheers.
Right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Buick, @FE News. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111. Okay, that was Last Days of Summer by Bastian Slice. And talking of slices, it's time for a piece of Kirsty Donnelly and her regular Stand Up for Skills. Hashtag Stand Up for Skills. Good evening, Kirsty.
Hi, Tom. You've been working on those strap lines again, haven't you?
I have been working on the segues and the strap lines. I've got to confess, now we've moved to the weekly show format, I'm also a bit rusty. So I've been a little bit wanting on some of the jingle switch-ups today. I think any regular listener will...
I don't mind being referred to as a cake. I've been eating a lot of cake during this COVID period, actually.
Oh, I think we all have. I think a national survey actually recently found that the nation's definitely put on weight as a result of the lockdown. Anyway, Maestro, over to you for your weekly hashtag Stand Up for Skills.
Great, good to be back. And hello again, everybody. And as Tom said, back from the weekly Stand Up for Skills segment. And I was reflecting, actually, as I was getting ready for tonight, past few weeks since we started this segment, and I've wrestled the mic off Tom. We have featured now a whole range of skills topics, and I think we shone a light just on how vital the technical and vocational skills sector is to our economy, and has been actually supporting the COVID crisis. We've covered topics from skills experts in the NHS to those supporting prison learning, those apprentices who are going through their learning, the FE sector and how they're coping with going digital. But tonight we're going to go macro with our theme. And I have to say it's a little bit scary too as a theme, although I'm pleased to say that my guests tonight are far from scary. In fact, one of them is the wonderfully passionate leading light policy creator and campaigner for all things youth, is of course the fabulous LJ Rawlings, CEO of Youth Employment, I should say, UK. And of course, therefore, our macro scary topic we'll be discussing is that of the dramatically rising unemployment for young people as a direct result of COVID, and what can be done about it. In fact, we're now talking of it as a pandemic. But also joining LJ is a young job seeker, Alex Moraski. Alex is a graduate who's been looking for work for some time. So thank you both, Alex and LJ, for being with me this evening.
Good to be here.
Hi, guys. Good. Hello, both. So, LJ, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, you'll know better than anyone the pretty startling figures at the moment. In fact, the latest ones this week from OECD predicting that the UK is going to face the worst slump compared to other developed worlds because of the COVID-19 impact. And of course, the sectors and the depth of the recession that's going to impact them around service sector, trade, tourism, real estate, hospitality, retail, etc. These are all going to be very hard hit down, and yet they are sectors where often a lot of young people are found getting their first roles and jobs. I mean, what's your view of that? I mean, how scary is it really looking for young people, and especially in those particular sectors?
Well, I'm afraid, and it's not like me to be the bearer of, the bad news, as you well know, but I'm afraid it looks really, really bleak for our young people. When we founded Youth Employment UK back in 2011, we had 1 million young people who were not in education, employment or training following the financial crash of 2008. Because of the scale of that, both a health and an economic impact that the coronavirus is having, we are anticipating youth unemployment, that number of neat young people, to rise between 1.5 to 2 million young people potentially by the end of this year. So it is going to be the biggest crisis that we've seen. And you're right, because of the sectors that are going to be hardest hit, they are the sectors where you're more likely to find young people. They're more likely to work in hospitality and retail and leisure and tourism, 2.5 times more likely as a cohort than any other group. So alongside the fact that actually we hadn't solved youth unemployment from the last round. So
absolutely,
we still had so many young people who were long-term unemployed, struggling to move through the labour market.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that actually in a moment. But let's just now move to Alex and hear literally from the horse's mouth, so to speak, how it has been. And how long have you been looking for work, Alex, just before we just give us a feel for the length of time?
Yeah, so I graduated in July last year. I started volunteering immediately. I was an English tutor at the Refugee Council, so I was organising and delivering lessons to help refugees learn English. I did a bit of volunteering in the general election, did some correspondence work, and I've got this amazing role at the YFF now. But in that time, I've managed to get one job interview and one assessment centre.
Wow.
I've got this massive long list, this Excel spreadsheet full of red crosses.
Gosh.
It's awful.
And what? I mean, I'm sure there's many, but what are your perceived blockers? What do you think it is that's stopping that cut through? Because you're obviously doing all the right things. I mean, more than all the right things in terms of showing that sort of, the right attitude. You've got skills. You've got experience behind you now. What do you think's actually causing these blockers?
There's many things. Directly for me, I've noticed there's a huge catch-22. I've also worked in the NHS as an admin officer, and I've been applying for a whole host of jobs, even administration jobs, but they're always saying 2 years experience, entry level. And so even though I have had admin experience, I haven't been able to get even those entry level jobs.
Sure. So what did you graduate in, Alex, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I graduated in politics and international studies from Warwick. I got a 2-1, so it's a Russell Group uni as well. So
yeah. So there we go then, LJ. We've got Alex there who sounds like a great guy, huge aptitude, experience, great background there in terms of his actual degree, and yet still can't cut through. And as you were saying before, we then look at younger people who have got even more difficult barriers to face. What opportunities and chances they have to cut through? And as you were saying before, when we look at the numbers and they're rising fast. And what also worries me is we've now going to have even more youth unemployment layered on top of what we hadn't resolved before, as you said earlier, with the fact that of course lots of adults are going to be facing unemployment as well. So how can a young person like Alex cut through even more so when there's going to be all these adults on the job market looking for work?
I've worked with Alex on the Youth Futures board now for months and spent quite a bit of time with him. Alex is an amazing candidate, hugely motivated and passionate about the topics and areas of where he wants to work. His application is brilliant. His personal, everything about him is just brilliant. He's a fantastic candidate. So if Alex can't do it and finds it so hard, we really have to question the systems. And maybe it's less about what young people can be doing. And we provide huge support to young people. But, even in May, we saw a 20% increase in young people coming online to look for careers advice and information about next steps. That's over 120,000 young people in 1 month looking for help in May. So they are being proactive and they are out there and they're looking and they're trying to find out about apprenticeship routes and, different pathways and what to do after GCSEs. That was one of the biggest search articles on our site was what to do after GCSEs. So that tells you about the cohort and what they're worried about and thinking about. So I think the question has to be more about what government and employers can do as opposed to what this young generation who have been thrown at sea. They're doing what they can within the means that they've got, but it's very difficult to get a Saturday job in a pandemic.
No, absolutely. Well, and it has been even before. I mean, that's reality. So just going on to that, and what can the government employers do? I mean, earlier on, Robert Halfon was talking very passionately about what he thinks he can do, and I don't know if you take much comfort in the fact that Prime Minister has been announcing, to make an apprenticeship pledge to every out of work young person, but. As great as apprenticeships are they the only answer? I mean, do you take a lot of hope from that, or are you surely looking for something much more than that from government and employers?
I think it's good and it's important to see that the Prime Minister's got to focus on young people. I do feel that the Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak are going to come out with some strong responses to the youth unemployment crisis we're about to head into. But we've been part of the Youth Employment Group, which is a specialist policy group that's set up with Impetus, Youth Futures Foundation, Prince's Trust and IES. And we've been working literally night and day. I can't tell you how many hours we've been working to try and put forward some further developed policy ideas to government, because we can't get into the state of just creating top level statements without any real quality and substance behind them. And I think we're at risk of that with the headlines. We're strongly recommending here that it has to be the right opportunity and a good quality education, employment or training offer. The apprenticeship part is really key, but it is one part. Not all young people want to do apprenticeships, and you're certainly not going to find, all of a sudden 400 apprenticeships in Corby for the young people that would have been leaving education this summer.
So would you support the idea of sort of things like skills credit, where employers are really encouraged to take on young people or people who are much lower skilled, for example, or haven't had the experience, just to try and encourage employers to take more people on, given lots of employers are looking to lay people off? I mean, are they the sorts of things that you're angling for?
Yeah, so we're looking at sort of those employer incentives, but I think it's also important to just hold and think about, do we want to incentivise employers whose businesses are at real risk of not surviving the next 6 months? Do we want to move young people into jobs, or anybody into a job that will put them back into, the welfare system because that's not sustained? So I think we have to be, cautious about, a broad blanket approach to some of this stuff. And that's where I think investment in job creation is really important.
Yes.
Looking at the sectors, I heard Sue, and absolutely whatever Sue says, I think. But thinking about some of those sectors that need support and investment from government that will become then job creation models.
Absolutely.
I think that's where we've got to really focus, those skills gaps there, and the opportunity for a UK that we all want to be part of because it's thriving and, it's developing in the right way for the centuries that we're living in.
Well, that's right. And as we knew even before COVID, there were already considerable skills gaps. So there was underemployment. And to a certain extent, although it seems odd now to be talking about underemployment when we've got such high unemployment already started and looming, there is no doubt there are a whole series of skills that still don't exist. And yet, what a great opportunity to start to train young people into those skills, as you say, so that we create that thriving economy. Coming back to Alex now, I mean, obviously, as LJ just said there, and a great supporter clearly, and let's hope some of our guests who were on earlier are still listening to the show, Alex, because I would hope to think your phone might be ringing up with some offers, at least to go and talk to them. But what sort of keeps you going, keeps you motivated? Clearly, your involvement with the work that you're doing with LJ, but what is it that sort of keeps driving you every day, and you get your hope from?
Well, I've after having this YFF this position, I've learned a lot about the sector, and I think I've learned quite a lot staying in the policy groups, and I'm quite motivated to be able to have that kind of influence and have my voice represented. So the fact I've got my foot into this sector and this role, it's kind of motivating me to look at some more policy related jobs and make a career out of that.
So it's almost exposed you to something you wouldn't necessarily have thought of before, really, which is great.
I mean, I'm from Yorkshire, so I've been quite passionate about regional inequality and a job that could help address that kind of structural problem that we have in this country is definitely worthwhile.
Brilliant. Well, and I think that ties very much, LJ, to what you were just saying in terms of let's really look at work and we create that jobs and skills creation. And we do know there's so much regional difference out there. And so, LJ, really just coming to you almost for the final word, because I know Tom will come and wrestle the mic back off me. But I mean, I know you are doing a lot of fantastic work, and as you say, working flat out to try and influence and take action now around policy. But if there was one magic wand wish that you could have tonight to make happen, so that something concrete did happen, what would it be?
Oh, that's too big. I've got 6. I can't do that. I think it's about listening to young people. Actually, do you know what? Let's do this differently this time. And let's put young people at the heart of the decision making. Let's make sure that we're hearing about their experiences, and that whether we're policy leads, campaigners, CEOs, business owners, whoever we are, recruiters, let's not do this again to this young generation, but let's do it with them. And I think that would be my magic wand ask.
Well, I think that's a brilliant way, and I think it ties into something Sue was saying earlier. Let's put the power of purchase almost in the hands of the young people themselves, and let them drive some of the momentum. I think that's a great way to end. And of course, Alex, probably most of all to end, wishing you the very best of luck. I can't help but feel you're moments away from clinching something somewhere. And thank you both for being on the show this evening. And LJ, I look forward to talking to you very soon offline anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks both. Tom, back to you.
Kirsty, thank you very much indeed for yet another insightful, informative segment. I think one of the fantastic things actually about hashtag Stand Up for Skills segments is that you always bring in the learner voice, the student voice, and obviously a very articulate young man there, Alex, who's done, as you say, everything that would have been expected of him from society, yet is still battling to get a foot on that opportunity ladder. Alex, we'll make sure that, because there are thousands of people now that listen to this, including, by the way, lots of ministers, CEOs and people that run training providers. If you're out there, guys, and you want to take on somebody, then do email the show, skillsworld@fenews.co.uk, and with Alex's permission, we'll pass on your details.
Just remember who his agent is.
Oh, I see. Well, see you next week, Kirsty. Take care.
Yeah, see you.
Right,
take
bye,
care. All the
everyone.
best, Tom. Cheers.
You're
Bye.
listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick.
Kirsty there, already angling for a 20% finder's fee. I love it. So there you have it, folks. That's the season opener of our weekly Skills World Live shows. Did we disappoint? Well, let us know by emailing skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Also, have you got any job offers there for Alex? Don't forget to join us next week when we'll be dissecting the government's latest Social Mobility Commission report and asking whether the cause of equality has been put back by a generation because of recent world events. As with today, we'll have another great lineup of informed guests, especially if the show's editor, Gavin O'Mara, has anything to do with it. As ever, thanks to him. And not forgetting, of course, our digital marketing guru and producer, Ellie Hansen. I'm going to play you out now with this rather soporific track, Purple Lilies by Some Wave. See you next week.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/skillsworld.